What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Giannis, and I, we are back on the mic for our weekly episode. Today, Gabe, I know exactly what we should talk about. We should talk about the recent Customs and Border Protection seminar that we did, and we should talk about how to get a first-class experience for economy price on Southwest. Those are my two takeaways from this week, and I'm fired up to chat. As per usual, if this is your first time listening, we appreciate you checking in. If you've been listening for a while, thank you so much. Please leave us a rating, leave us a review, and share the episode with someone if you get value. But Gabe, let's dive right in, man. How you doing today?
What's going on here with your voice?
Bro, I'm going to call this my hard charger voice. This is the voice that I get when, I record too many podcasts, I put on too many seminars, and I throw down with Tim Kennedy last week. That's what happens.
Dude, I love it. I love it. Some people get sore. Some people get DOMs. Jason gets, what'd you call it? The
horse voice? I don't know.
Hustle voice?
Hustle voice. Oh, hustle voice. This is my hustle voice. And I got to recover it because, dude, I'm putting on an event for the kids' school on Thursday. And then I fly out on Friday to Chicago to go talk at Two Brain Summit. So I got to make sure I'm on lock, man. I'll be there. I'll be ready.
Yeah, a lot going on, man. You've been traveling a lot. I was lucky enough to be there yesterday for the talk you gave to Customs and Border Protection. So their SRT team here in Texas in San Antonio. We were over at Camp Bullis. Is that he was pronouncing it different. It's Camp Bullis, right?
Well, I mean, I call it Camp Bullis, but whatever they call it is probably right.
I think he said, I think I heard them say it and I was like, damn, I haven't been saying it like that. But yeah, man, huge base out here, like north of San Antonio. So in my neck of the woods, I was able to go out there and join you for that, which was a cool experience. It's always cool to get to work with, people that are, I don't know if saying front lines is like the right term, but that are out there, like, being, we talk about protectors and providers a lot. Like these guys are, a lot of them raise their hands when you ask like who has kids. Like these guys are dads, they're husbands, but they've also chosen a profession where they're protecting in many ways for a living. And I remember when we did the other event at Camp Pendleton with another Customs and Border Protection SRT team, and we spent the whole day with them. So we had some downtime to just kind of, talk to them, like what their job entails. I was blown away by what they actually do. Some pretty cool stuff. And I know that it's very different depending on where they are. Like San Diego is going to be different than like what Texas does. It's going to be different than like what, headquarter does in the Northeast. So, but it was interesting, man. There's people out there doing really important jobs that I think we kind of take for granted, right? Like you don't think about, these very essential functions that are happening that you have to be fit for. And you talked about that yesterday, right? You talked about this pyramid of what it takes to kind of be a protector. And I'll let you talk about that a little bit more, but it was cool to be able to go out there. And what I think was the coolest piece of everything was the group that you were talking to were like a graduating class, right? So it was 11 guys who had just, I think a month ago, gone through the selection process, which is, very, very tough month meant to weed out people that aren't mentally tough enough to actually get into the special response team. And then they had gone on like a month of leave and now they were back to kind of hit their initial training. So they're new people to this SRT team. So the cool thing about that was the eagerness to kind of like learn and like the level of like, soaking it all in from you. And what felt like a really engaged group that, just based on the questions I was getting, about like nutrition and stuff once we were done, like these guys really wanted to take care of their fitness and their health. And I think you really inspired them to hopefully, start taking some real steps to do everything that you talked about and really take pride in their fitness, not just because their job depends on it, but because they have that responsibility as father and husband. So overall, man, really cool experience. I think you crushed it. And it was cool to see their reception in real time and you putting them through a workout, all that good stuff. So glad I was able to go out there.
Yeah. I mean, so 11 guys graduated. So I want to say 70 went into the final selection process and 11 graduated. So a pretty small group of guys finished. And, you hit the nail on the head, man. These guys, they're out there really protecting and the country and for their families and all the things that we care about, right? And my goal when I was out there was really to give them cliff notes, give them education to level them up just 10%. And so, I put on maybe an hour and a half seminar. And then the way I did it was I wanted to show the concepts I was talking about in real life. And I did all the workouts with them. And you and I talked about this, because you were there, it was good because you could coach. But I wanted to show them like, hey, we're going to do all these burpees. We're going to do all these things. Then how do you regain your breath? And, for me, I had 3 big takeaways from this particular activation, which was, one is that preparation is key. And you're going to fall to your, what's the saying? Gabe, you're going to,
so a lot of people think that, when shit hits the fan, that you're going to rise to the occasion. There's this like overestimation of like, hey, if, I had to do something because my life was in danger, my family's life is in danger, like, I'm just going to like,
man up,
that adrenaline.
Yeah,
exactly. Just get it done. Yeah. And that's so far from the truth. And luckily I haven't had to experience this first time, but I know this to be true. And people like Tim Kennedy talk about this all the time. People that have actually lived it and know and can speak to this from experience, but you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back to your like highest level of preparation and training. Like if anything, you're going to perform less than you would if you were in a controlled setting. And that less is going to be like the level of, where your preparation has taken you with reps, with constant practice, with training, so on and so forth. So I think that that's an important thing for everyone to realize, but yeah, keep going on.
Well, I was just saying, so they're doing, CQC, close quarter stuff. They're doing shoot houses, they're doing all these different things. And my job was just go in there and lay the framework with these guys just entering these units of how do you get fit and why does fitness matter? And, so the fact that the SRT group prioritizes experts to come in and share their knowledge and get them right when they enter the team, dude, I just think it's so valuable because what I talked about is this pyramid. And this pyramid actually, really was inspired by Tim Kennedy, where we talk about this pyramid of a protector. And at the top of it, at the bottom of the pyramid is fitness. Then, like, what are you more likely to use in real life as a dad, as a husband, but also in their field? Probably like some type of first aid. And then the next one be combatives. And then the next one be firearms. It'd be like fitness at the baseline. You got to use that to protect all the time. Then it'd be first aid. You probably, you might come across something. Then combatives, then firearms. But the idea there is that you can move those around and do whatever you want. But the idea is that none of the other things matter if your fitness isn't on point. You cannot perform a tourniquet. You can't do combatives. You can't shoot if you can't breathe. And so I was really trying to get across these guys that for their career and just as husbands and fathers, like you got to have your fitness on point. Otherwise, all these other things, they'll lack execution. And that was the major point I wanted to make. You're on mute.
No, it was my little thing. And I think that this applies to everyone, really importantly, because exactly what you said, like the average person, more so than these guys, like, the chances of you like hand-to-hand combat, hopefully very, very unlikely, right? Especially if you have good situational awareness, you're not getting yourself in like, dangerous, shitty situations. It's probably not going to happen. Firearms, even more rare. Right? Like,
exactly.
Like, and I think that that's an interesting point specifically, because I think like, especially here in Texas, like I know this to be true, like gun culture is a real thing, right? Like conceal carry is a real thing. Like a lot of guys, like the gun clubs are super popular. Like conceal carry is like this big thing, it's your constitutional right. And that's all well and good. But I think that the truth of the matter is like the chances that you're going to have to actually use your concealed carry weapon in a situation should be like extremely, extremely rare. Like if you're not putting yourself in like some crazy, like risky situations, that should be something that, again, if you ever needed to, hopefully you are prepared to have the proper training and can kind of like, do that appropriately if you need to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the average law enforcement officer, if I'm not mistaken, they pull out their firearm like, almost daily. but if I'm not mistaken, like 90%, and I'd have to look this up, but like 90% of law enforcement officers never have to fire their weapon on duty. So you have to figure like if they are at 90% don't have to, the average person's probably like 99.9%, right? So it's just not as common, but you should still have the skills, of course. You know what I mean?
Right. But I think the important point there that you mentioned is like, but now what's the likelihood of you potentially having to apply a tourniquet, of you potentially having to perform CPR, of you potentially having to like, even just like identify like and triage, like what's going on here? What can I do? Who do I call? Like all of those things are, I don't know what the number would be, but just it's significantly more likely that you're going to have to do those things. But like in many things, nutrition, fitness, it's like the less sexy thing, right? Like what's sexy? Like I'm going to the range and I'm getting really badass at shooting. That's super sexy. You can take pictures. It's like, you know, you can post it on social media. You're like this badass, like whatever. And that's all good. Like I enjoy that too.
Yep.
However, like, you know, what isn't sexy is like how many times, when was the last time you practiced putting on a tourniquet? When was the last time that you like checked the first aid kit that you bring to your car and make sure that everything's in there, that you know where it is? Because again, this whole thing about like, you know, if shit hits the fan, you're going to fall back to the level of preparation and training. Like if God forbid we're in a car accident or there's a car accident that I see and I want to go out there and like help in any way, shape or form, is that the moment where I'm going to remember, where's the first aid kit in my car? Where's the tourniquet in my car? How do I apply this? Like, is that the moment where I'm going to figure all those things out and rise to the occasion? Or should it be something that, you know, I mean, not every day, but every so often, like us as a family are reviewing like, hey, it's behind the passenger seat in the front car. The tourniquet is here. Here's how you apply a tourniquet. Here's how you do those things. Like, I think that those things are, you know, not talked about enough, but significantly more likely than you'll have to use. And again, I think that it all falls under this bucket of like, hopefully you never have to do any of these things. But if you're prioritizing what you should prepare for, I think that there's a very strong case to prioritize the first aid stuff. But regardless of what you're prioritizing, whatever, that discussion aside, if you can't breathe, you can't do any of them. If your heart rate is at your max heart rate, you can't do any of them. If you can't like efficiently sprint to the person that you're trying to get to or the person you're trying to run away from, and potentially, I love when Dr. Mike Israetel brought this up, potentially have to sprint and carry. Like right now, if I had to get away from a situation or go towards a situation and I'm with my kids, like I have to carry them. So there's also something to be said about like, you know, performing a run, and we were talking about this with the CBP guys yesterday. Like that's why they're incorporating into their test, like these 300-meter distance runs, because like you're never necessarily going to do like 100-meter sprint. I mean, maybe you're also like 1.5 miles is something that's commonly tested, but when are you really like in emergency scenario having to run that long? There's like this 400 meter distance that tends to be like again, talking about most likely scenarios that you'll either have to run to safety or run towards something that you have to run towards, and potentially carrying something, right? Yeah. Carrying your child, carrying, you know, the first aid kit, whatever it is you need to carry.
Well, Matt, I told you this. I was coming back from LA once. This is like what, 6 months ago or a year ago, whenever it was, I told you about this, maybe 2 years ago. And a car right in front of me, tire blew, flipped over. It had 12 people in it. And I got out, grabbed my first aid kit, and we called 911 and all that stuff. But like, dude, that really happened. And it's like, but I get the point I'm trying to make with all of this is that we wanted to build a framework for these guys to recognize that in their jobs, in our jobs, whatever you want to do, you can't perform these higher level skills if you cannot breathe and move. And it doesn't matter how well you've trained on any of these other skill sets if you can't compose yourself. And so as I took them through practical application, I really work with them on getting your heart rate back underneath and back under control, so you can, if needed, perform the task that's required. And that was one of my big takeaways, was that these guys are out there really putting in the work to educate themselves, to be prepared for what they need to do for a living. And we're honored to work with them. And that was my biggest takeaway. It was like, these guys were engaged, they were fired up, and they wanted to learn. And it made me very fulfilled that we could be able to provide some of that to them. And they were asking you all kinds of questions too.
Yeah, no, it was a super engaged bunch. Got some really good questions about nutrition. It's funny how like the common questions about nutrition, like regardless of the cohort, like from CBP, like SRT people to like, your average gym goer that's just trying to improve their body composition, it always ends up being the same question. So I thought that was interesting, but yeah, super good questions from that group. I think that tying it to something that I've been going through recently, I think that like fitness also just plays such a big role in help and breathing specifically in just like modulating, I don't know if that's a word, but like your stress levels. And right now, dude, I mean, it has been chaos at home, like absolute chaos. I think that the whole like, having a toddler and having a newborn, like it's naive to say that we didn't expect it to be hard. And I think that it's kind of met my expectations, but I think that secretly I like hoped for it to not be as hard, because when we had when we had our first, honestly, like I was expecting it to be really hard. Like our routine was going to be thrown out of whack. Like you don't have sleep and you're stressed all the time and whatever. And I think that it actually ended up being, at least for us, a lot easier than we expected. And I think I went into second baby with a little bit of like, I think that, people say this is really hard and like, but I think that, we do a really good job. We're very intentional. We have a plan. We have a lot of support from our parents. I don't think this is going to be as bad as maybe I'm expecting. And bad isn't the word for it. Hard. Just like there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of missing sleep. There's a lot of just stress. And I'd be lying if I said that fitness and just being able to like something as simple as like breathing, dude, when you have two kids screaming at the top of their lungs, and because it's happened many times, because one gets upset, the other one gets upset, we have to like try and divide and conquer. And it is just absolute chaos. It's like hot outside, so you can't really go outside. So you're like in the house, and to just be able to like stay calm in those moments and like figure out like, okay, what's in my control right now? Like, what can I check off the list of potential needs that these, two tiny humans that I love more than anything in the world, but can't yet communicate what they need? Like, how do I just methodically go down the list? Okay, are they hungry? Do they need their diaper changed? Are they potentially cold? Do they need a nap? And be able to do that like very logically while it's like absolute chaos, until eventually you always find out what it is they need. And then they calm down and then everything's fine. But I can see how very easily, without being able to just control the stress and, everything, that can easily spin out of control. You can spin out of control. You can get frustrated. You can forget what it is that you're like trying to do. You can get super agitated with your partner. And then that just, like stems into a whole other issue. And it leads to like a really bad place. And I think that we've definitely had our moments that haven't been easy, but I think we've dealt with it as well as we could, in large part because of this fitness foundation and like understanding your breathing, understanding staying under control. And I think that there's a lot of truth, especially with newborns, that they feed off of your energy. Like if you start freaking out because they're freaking out, like now you're just both freaking out for a really long time. And I think we've done a really good job at being able to like stay calm regardless of how chaotic everything has been. And again, I owe all of that, or most of that, to I think like fitness, breathing, doing hard things, all the things that we talk about all the time.
Was it Adam Salcedo who's talking about box breathing? Who was talking about
Adam?
Yeah. So we just had him on the show. And yeah, I mean, again, one of the biggest things I was trying to work with these CBP crew on is breathing, and especially breathing when in high stress. And high stress can come in so many different ways, man. It could be with two kids crying. It could be with, a business deal that isn't going down. It could be, you and your spouse. But if you can find a way to take your heart rate from wherever it's at and just calm it. One of the things I've been doing, I've been wearing a G-Shock, and I've been keeping the heart rate monitor on it all the time. And I've been really trying to regulate and see, and granted, take this with a grain of salt, because like the heart rate monitor is good, but it's not great. But I'm always trying to see like, hey, how's my resting heart rate? And am I at a heightened state? Can I breathe and bring myself back down? And so, if you have an Apple Watch or G-Shock, you could be able to do that too. Because what you'll feel is that if you could breathe and bring it down, dude, you just talk different, act different, perform more clearly because you're calm. But if you're not getting exposure to this through adversity and training, it's very difficult to rise that occasion in real life. So you gotta hit your workouts. I mean, the burpee test is the best example ever. 10 minutes, 15 burpees every minute. it's just such a great analogy for find your breathing rhythm, bring your heart rate back down, and be able to finish.
I love that test, man. I love that test because it's accessible to everyone. And I generally agree with you, man. Like I think everyone should be able to do that. Would you? So here's a question, a little bit of a loaded question. I'm curious how you would answer it. Because yesterday you said, and I completely agree with this, that every man should be able to complete this test. Would you? Is it a different number for women? You think? You know, in CrossFit background, you know, like loading, always different, makes perfect sense. Row distances, calories on the bike, always different, makes perfect sense. When it comes to burpees, you don't necessarily see that number different in workout prescriptions. I know that yesterday we had a group of especially men, so I'm asking you kind of like, would you say that this is a test that women should also be able to accomplish? Is there any difference there? I don't really have an answer, but I'm curious.
It's a really good question. And if I'm being honest, you know, I've been very biased towards men. And just because we have the men's club, I do it every week with them. I work with a lot of military and law enforcement group, which is primarily men. So I have not had much exposure to the burpee test with many women. What I would say is...
Did we mention what the burpee test was? Just a quick moment of clarification. Yeah.
Yeah, the burpee test is every minute on the minute, 15 burpees. You could jump and clap at the top. You could not. It doesn't matter.
For 10 minutes.
For 10 minutes.
And the goal
just
is
drop
10
to the
minutes,
ground,
right?
Chest and thighs hit the ground, stand back up again, 15 every minute on the minute. If you finish in 30 seconds, you get 30 seconds rest. If you finish in 50 seconds, you get 10 seconds rest. And I believe that every guy should be able to do that. And it's not easy because you need to learn how to control your breath. You need to have the stamina. You need to have conditioning, all kinds of stuff. You bring up a really good question. What I would say is this. I think that for women, you would probably have to reduce it to like 12. And here's the reason why I'm saying that. I think their pushing stamina for a push-up would wear out before a man's does. And by the way, I mean, dude, there's plenty of women that could smash this, but I'm talking about in generality. Right. I think that
what everyone should be able to do. And I agree with that. I think the pushing strength is a limiting factor. Yeah.
The pushing strength would be a limiting factor. They would have a difficult time after 100 plus burpees or push-ups to be able to drive their chest off the ground, in my opinion. You know, but again, I could be proven wrong. There's plenty of women that can do 15 a minute, every minute for 10 minutes. But I would say that on average, you know, burpees for the average woman, their press burns out before a man's.
Yeah. That makes sense. Cause I think the aerobic endurance thing is much more level playing field.
Exactly.
But you're going to get tired on the push. The other thing that I love about that test specifically, because everyone, I mean, obviously not everyone, but most people, majority of people should be able to do 15 burpees in 1 minute, right? Like that.
Yeah.
If you actually do that, it's not like a crazy pace. You don't have to like be doing burpees at, you know, RP 10 to finish and you're like, boom, 1 second rest and you got to go.
Right.
So I think that the interesting thing, and I've seen people when we have like Death by Burpees programmed at the gym where I coach recently, well, not super recently, but we had it this year and I remember coaching it is, and I told everyone, the benefit of pushing the pace to get an extra 10 seconds rest is so not worth it. Like how much more energy you need to expend and how much more you spike your heart rate by doing 15 burpees in even 40 seconds compared to 49 seconds, which was the pace that you showed yesterday. That difference, that 9-second difference is huge. And it's so not worth the extra 9 seconds of rest. It might feel good that like, oh, like, you know, I have 30 seconds rest or 20 seconds rest, but I'm telling you, you got to stretch that minute out as much as you can. And I think that that's a super important lesson on pacing that people can learn by even doing this test once and starting with like, you know, hey, I finished in 35 seconds. And then, you know, by minute 3, minute 4, you're toast. Then doing it again in a week and trying to, you know, get the 15 done in 50 seconds. And now you can get a lot further, probably even finish it.
Yeah. I mean, with these guys too, I said, look, I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to do this with you. If you just do exactly as I do, you're going to finish. But naturally you have guys that go out a little bit hot. And after like 3 minutes, dude, guys just get blasted. So then we have like a redemption round. So what we did yesterday is we did, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was like 5 minutes of burpees. Then we had a minute off, and then we did 2 more rounds that were redemption rounds, saying, hey, if you missed it before, let's see if we can get it back again. Trying to build up this earned confidence, trying to build up their mindset. And dude, they did a great job. But I think if you've never done the burpee test, pause the podcast or finish the podcast and go hit your burpee test and let us know how it goes.
Pause the podcast, hit the burpee test, give us a rating or review, and then come back to the podcast.
These guys suck because I didn't finish the burpee test.
Oh man, no, but it was a cool experience, man. It's always interesting to watch people do that kind of stuff too, because at least selfishly, it's a reminder that like we're pretty fit. And I know that obviously we work out all the time, but like all the work that we've put in being in the fitness space for so long, kind of training, whether it was competitively in the past or now, whatever, I think it is a good reminder because these are fit individuals, they're fit, very capable individuals. Like when you were saying
you won football player, the big guy, bro, he was, dude, yeah. For how big he was, he moved hella well.
He did move well. Yeah. And he had a good engine too. But it's at least for me, it's always a good reminder because sometimes, you do all this work in the gym and yes, I'm happy with the results and I'm seeing so on and so forth. But it is nice to every now and then just get this reminder because I could do the burpee test. I could do it here right now and get back on the podcast and I'll probably be breathing a little heavy for 2 minutes, but no big deal. And then, we'll be good. And I think it's a testament to the work that you put in because you kind of just have that in your back pocket now. And that's so nice to have because yes, you can start today and make significant progress to get there. But if you have that, it's pretty hard to lose it, specifically when it comes to metabolic conditioning and aerobic conditioning. Once you've spent the years building that base and you do just minimal, because again, I run, and do some really easy runs. Now I'm running twice a week and everything else I do is pretty much, flex and bodybuilding stuff. There's some conditioning built in there, but the ability to maintain once you actually do all the work to build is a big reason why I encourage people to as soon as possible, do the work now, because you can get to the point where you can just maintain your fitness level by not having to do that much if you front load the work, because you're only going to get busier. It's only going to get tougher to do it later in life, later in your 20s, later in your 30s, later in your 40s. Front load the work and go into a place where you can just maintain. And it's so much easier than getting to a point where you're man, I really have to turn things around now.
Well, that reminds me. So I did the Nick Bear podcast while I was out in Texas. What was that, yesterday, right? Yeah, Nick Bear was yesterday.
Yesterday. It's all a blur.
This guy, dude, Nick Bear, I'm talking to him. And dude, he ran a 6-minute mile for a full marathon and can deadlift 500 pounds. Dude, he's a freak hybrid athlete. And we had a great conversation. I'm sure that podcast will be coming out soon, but he's a good example of someone that's put in so many miles that now he just can build a hedge. Dude, he's running 8 miles a day or, almost every day, but at a, not, crazy pace, but he's still able to go out there and go do his marathons or longer because he's just built this hedge, man. He's just been putting in the work for so many years.
Yeah, man. Aerobic conditioning is just built brick by brick, man. Just mile by mile, hour by hour that you're logging in that just slow, boring pace. And, I'm super lucky because not super intentionally, not looking at hey, I need zone 2 for longevity and whatever. I just swam all my life. I swam club, I swam high school, I swam college, and literally swimming is just back and forth. You do 2-a-days, all of high school and college, and you just get so much time that I'm very thankful for that because, it's very tough. And we experience a lot of people that if you're not in good aerobic shape now and you're trying to get into it, it could be pretty tough to get started. Cause it's also it's a little demoralizing, right? If you go out there and you're
you're running a little bit and you're just smoked,
winded right away.
You could also, dude, but think about it this, bro. You could also capture more education. So we talked about these CBP guys and others trying to learn and grow. Think about this. When you're on your runs, I was talking to Nick about this and a new book that he was talking to me about. he's listening to audiobooks.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
listening to podcasts. It's a good time that you can get in. Like, he talked to me about one called For the Culture by Marcus Collins. And so I got it on Audible now, but it's like, it's a great opportunity to educate yourself and to grow while also physically like growing. It's combined, right? Because it's not like you're out there, you know, you don't have to listen to music. You could find a bunch of different things you can listen to educate yourself.
Yeah, 2 for 1, man. And lately, sometimes I'll do podcasts a lot, most of the times, but lately, I've been doing it without anything, and it's just been really good time for me to think, which I think is also super beneficial.
For sure.
Like either brainstorm stuff for work, honestly, like things that I want to write about, things that I want to talk about. Just in general, I think that it's been a really nice opportunity to just be away from all the distractions. Because I'll these last couple of runs, I've been leaving my phone at home because I even find that it's distracting because it links up to my watch. Obviously, like I'll be running and I'll still see things coming in, and that'll kind of throw my whatever I'm thinking about off the track. So that's been really nice too. But I think that, you know, you don't get that many opportunities to like fully disconnect, and running without my phone has been that. So podcast, super great, but also just having time to like, just like nothing's going to come in. No one's talking to me, especially now, man. Like it's been so nice to go on these runs. And you know, not that I want to get away from the house, but it just recharges me in such an important way that I feel like I need now, for sure.
For sure. Yeah, man. I actually, you know, I feel inspired. I'm going to go for a run today. You know, I one of the things I want to get into is, we need to talk on this podcast at some point about when I'm going to start. I want to train with sand exclusively for the tactical games. So the tactical games I'm doing in September, right? And I want to see what it's like if you only trained with sand for a little bit. And so I'm going to keep all the listeners updated on that, because we will be at the CrossFit Games. And then I will be at the Origin camp, which is like a Origin Jiu-Jitsu camp. And then September 7th is the tactical games. I think it's in Utah, if I'm not mistaken, but I signed up for it. So I'm all good. I'm ready to rock.
Sandbag training, like, man, I don't know if I would recover.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's I was just saying, from my back injury, sandbag training was crucial to helping me now being able to like squat and do stuff heavy again, because it's such a powerful way. And I'm talking about like the heavy sandbag, like carries, holds, and even squats. It's such a great way to like completely load all the erectors that hold your spine in a strong place without actually compressing your spine. So if you think about doing either a carry or a hold or even a squat with a heavy sandbag, so talking like, you know, 100, 150, even 200 bear hugged across your chest. So if you think about it, when you're doing that, it has the load so much in front of your like midline. So if you think about different squats, like back squat, the load is like directly on top of your spine, right? And that's how I hurt my back. Front squat is a little bit better. It's a little bit in front of your midline. So you really have to like brace your core, brace your erectors to be in a good neutral position. If you break that neutral position, you'll lose the bar and you aren't able to squat it. So that's a little bit better. A sandbag squat is even more so, because now you have so much of this big round object is so far in front of your midline that you're not going to be able to squat that weight if your erectors, so like the muscles around your spine, aren't super, super tense and your core isn't super tense for the entire rep. And that means that you're going to obviously squat less weight, you're going to squat less reps, but it's so much more taxing, so much tougher. Like you do a set of, you know, you can probably like right now I can go into the gym and, you know, maybe I can front squat 225 for 8, and that would be tough, but try front squatting with a 200-pound sandbag for 8, and it's a completely different beast. And it's just because so much more is statically like having to work.
Well, it's congested. It's like on your chest. You can't really breathe. It's like it's all the things. It's everything.
Yeah. It's just so much more of your like what I call your like real core. You know, when people think about like core work, they think about like sit-ups, hollow rocks, and all that stuff is great. But there's a whole other side to your core on your back that, you know, you really need to work with a load to make sure that like the muscles that protect your spine are like strong and stable.
Well, for sure. I mean, if you ask anybody who's like an expert at stones, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but like when you're picking up stones or heavy sandbags, it is one of the very rare times that you lap the stone or lap the sandbag, and then you actually round your spine out over the object to get it up to your shoulder, right? And it's unique because you could brace into an object, right? You could brace into the object that's there. I find that's really unique and helpful for practical application. Like you heard me talk about this to CBP yesterday. I said, guys, if you could deadlift 500 pounds in a solid spine position, do you really think that if your spine gets out of a good position with 200 pounds, you're going to get hurt? No. But if you're able to round out around an object and learn how to lift that way too, man, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's the thing that I think is the important thing that, if you take your level 1 or even the talk you gave yesterday, again, approaching it the way you approached it is very important because people are, for the most part, going to be lifting with a barbell, right? And neutral spine, super important. It is going to be safe. And everything you said is true, right? Like neutral spine all the time is the safest. Going from, having a shitty position the entire time is not ideal, but it's like the next best. And then going from like a good position to a shitty position to back to a good position under load is the worst thing because now you have the spine actually moving. All that makes perfect sense. The benefit of sandbag training though is I think that CrossFit and coaching stuff and especially if you come off your level 1, you're like a neutral spine Nazi, right? Like you're going out there and you're like straighten your back, straighten your back, straighten your back. I think that two things that I've seen kind of stem from that is one is some people overextend, like there's almost like an exaggeration of the position. Like it's like proud chest, whatever. And next thing you know, they're not actually in a neutral spine anymore. They're actually in a hyperextended position, which maybe isn't as bad as a
flexible woman. A lot that can happen. With men, it's not as common, but with some women, dude, they can get super extended.
Yeah. Which isn't as potentially dangerous as like a flexed spine or like a curved spine, but it isn't ideal either. But I think that constantly being so obsessed with everything neutral spine has, done a disservice a little bit because, we always talk about like these functional movements being, translating into real life, but you never really pick up most things. Like if I go to pick up my toddler, if I look at it, if I were to film it, I'm not doing it with a neutral spine. Like my spine is absolutely bending down and I'm grabbing it. Like when Ariel has to pick up our toddler while also carrying our newborn in her carrier, she's not able to do that with a neutral spine. She's absolutely flexing her spine. So I think that there's something to be said. And the reason sandbags are so great because you don't need that much load to get a really good stimulus. So you can lift a 100 pound, sandbag and it'll give you a great stimulus with your back having to round. Whereas the barbell equivalent, like if you're deadlifting a 95 pound barbell, that feels easy. It feels like you're not really getting much of a strength stimulus. So that difference in like 100 pound sandbag feeling so much more work than doing 95 pound barbell deadlifts, I think is the beauty too of doing sandbag training because you're training your spine to flex under load, but you're doing it with a safer load than if you were doing it with a barbell that feels hard, but isn't necessarily as heavy. So it's able to train those positions without putting you so much at a risk of injury, which is great.
Yeah. So for clarity's sake on this, if we're talking about a sandbag that's a round sandbag, like a stone, for me, when I take it off the ground, what I think about is getting it as much my hands underneath it as possible. So I go left, right, left to shuffle my hands underneath. Now, when I get down, I squat down with my chest tall. So my lumbar is extended. I'm in a squat position. I then stand up, squat. Once it's lapped, that's when I round out my spine to then either bring it up to my chest or to bring it up my shoulder. But that rounding position is like rounding around this object. That's a way of doing like heavy stones. Now, dude, if you're grabbing like I did a workout 2 days ago with an 80 pound sandbag, bro, you're just gripping and ripping that thing. To your point, like it's the practical application, I think, of sandbags in training is not something I've done enough of. And it's something I want to do more of for sure. 100%. And it tests your grip too. So for jiu-jitsu, it's great.
Yeah, man. Super versatile piece of equipment. I love it. I have 2 sandbags. Honestly, nowadays I don't use them as much as I'd like to. But it was a big piece of my training when I was recovering from my back injury for sure.
Jerry cans, baby. Jerry cans. That's it's Jerry. You know what? I'm gonna train with the sandbag today. I feel motivated and inspired. I'm gonna go train with the sandbag today.
Oh man.
Yeah,
That's funny.
it's gonna be good.
All right, we are taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about what we have going on in the month of June at Train Hard. So one of the things that's become increasingly apparent with what Jason has going on with the Train Hard Men's Club and just all these conversations we've been having on the podcast is that while there are some obvious physical benefits to training hard and fitness, it pales in comparison to the mental health benefits of working out, of training, and doing that alongside other people. So for the month of June, we have this shoulder to shoulder campaign going on. And what that is our effort to bring awareness to the specific challenges that men are facing when it comes to mental health. We have some awesome guests on the podcast for the month of June. We're talking about this in the newsletter, and we have a patch for sale on the Train Hard shop where all proceeds from that patch, so all proceeds from the shoulder to shoulder Train Hard patch, are going to be donated to Movember, a nonprofit that we're super stoked to be working with because they're doing some great work. Again, also bringing awareness to the challenges, but actually putting out programs and taking action to help solve and provide solutions for suicide prevention, helping deal with anxiety, depression, all these things that are super beneficial to men. So if you want to participate in that, if you want to support that cause, we're super fired up about it. You can go on the Train Hard shop for that shoulder to shoulder patch. All proceeds are going to go to Movember, or you can just share this podcast, share the newsletter, help us continue to have this conversation. But let's get back to the show.
I'm still trying to figure out what we're going to do for the CrossFit Games, but if you are going to be there, we will be there. That's a ways away. And then obviously,
but not a ways away.
Yeah. What is it? It's June 4th right now when we're recording this. All the semifinals I think are over, if I'm not mistaken. So everybody that's supposed to be going to the CrossFit Games has already been determined. And our girl Toomey, she crushed it. I want to get her on the podcast and talk about what it's been like training and also being a mom, because she didn't miss a beat, bro. She took some time off, had a baby, came back, dominated. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know if we'd want to talk to her. I like, it's always interesting, like if me or us as men, it's like appropriate to kind of like ask these questions or have these discussions. But one thing I talked about with Ariel a lot about is, like this celebration or highlighting of a lot of these athletes, like coming right back to competing, and the maybe perceived pressure for then the average woman to feel like they need to quote unquote bounce back maybe sooner than they're ready, and kind of differentiating like, hey, you do this as a professional athlete versus the average person. Because I know that, and this is something that my wife Ariel is super, super passionate about, is just like the appropriate window of like, healing and how much time the body really needs after something like childbirth before getting back to fitness, and some of the pressure that's out there to like, lose the baby weight or get back to working out or whatever. And sometimes the irreversible consequences that happen from rushing that process. Maybe we can talk to Tia about that. I'm curious to get her thoughts, but I just think that it's very different when you're talking about, this is my profession and this is what I do, versus everyone else. But the problem is that everyone else looks up to these people, looks up to the athletes. And when they see that, Tia's doing the open or the semifinals or whatever it is she did, like literally right after giving birth, they're like, oh, well, I should be trying to get back as soon as possible. And I don't think it's the right choice for everyone.
Yeah, we'd have to ask her thoughts on that for sure, because I'd also make the argument that like, I don't know if she really lost much fitness while being pregnant. Like, dude, she was still training. She was still getting after it. I'm sure there was a bunch of stuff she didn't do, of course. But I mean, I'd imagine even when she was super pregnant, I mean, bro, she was probably in better shape than most people. And
100%.
And it also brings up this really interesting point that like, how much did she actually get less fit? But how much of it is actually up here? Like, what I'm curious about is like, is she so dominant because she's physically better than all the other girls? Or is she so dominant because she's literally like the full package? She's mentally tough and physically dominant. Like how much did she lose? But she's still so much ahead of everybody because I don't know. I'm excited to talk to her. I love Tia. I think it'd be a great conversation. And she's so dominant, dude. She's so good.
Arguably the GOAT, right?
Dude, I don't think there's anything to argue with her. Like, she is the greatest of all time female CrossFitter. Like, there's no doubt about it. Yeah.
but that's the thing. But is she the greatest of all time? Period. Like,
what do you mean? I just said that. Yeah.
No, but not greatest of all time female CrossFitter. Like, is she the GOAT in a sport where men and women both compete in, like, this isn't like WNBA, NBA, right? Like, this is the CrossFit Games. Yes, there's a women's division and a men's division, but like the argument of like, who is the GOAT? Is it Rich? Is it Matt? Or is it Tia? And
so she won at the CrossFit Games. She was a runner-up in 15 and 16, and then winner in 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So 6-time champ, 2-time runner-up. And dude, I don't know, man. I think here's what I would say. I would say that her performances
rank them. Rank the 3. Go.
I think that her performances put her at the top.
And then who's 2 and 3?
Well, we've already had this conversation. I would say the reason why I think that Tia is at the top is because her performances have just been so dominant for so long. Like, she just, and not to mention, she, like, you know, she's an Olympian, and then she did like Commonwealth winner. I mean, dude, her accolades are like crazy.
She like made the Olympics for winter and summer, right? Or am I making that up? I know she made it. I know she made it for weightlifting. I can't. Because didn't she make bobsledding, or am I making that up? I might be making that up.
No, you're right. No, she didn't make, she was like one step away from making the team for bobsledding. She was like on like the training team or something like that. And then she qualified for the Olympics for weightlifting.
Oh man.
Yeah, weightlifting for Australia. So I mean, dude, that's just wild, bro. I mean, she's just, so it brings up a really good point. Like, is it her physical dominance that's getting her there? I mean, obviously it helps, but it's
piece
also
of it. It's definitely a piece of it.
But it's also her mindset, man. Like, I mean, yeah, we gotta have her on. I'm gonna message her right now.
Shoot her a text.
Yeah, I'm gonna shoot her a text because I just think she's so legit. I just can't wait to talk to her.
He's literally texting her right now. If you're on video, he's looking down because he's on his phone texting Tia Claire to me on the podcast.
Oh my God. Fine. I'll wait until we go.
You know, one thing that, so they just had a race in New York City, dude. So Hyrox has been blowing up, right? Super popular. Yeah. Like, looks so cool. And they did such a good job marketing this thing. And I don't know if you saw, but recently they had one in New York City and Lance Armstrong competed in it. And I follow Lance on social. So I saw he posted that he was like nervous about it. And then he competed and they had a really cool like hype video of him competing it. So that was cool. But then I also saw a bunch of like the people that I, you know, remember from like the CrossFit scene in New York competed and got into it. And one thing that Hyrox does a great job at is they take like awesome event photographs that they then make, you know, available for people and they share it. It's great marketing. And it looks like a lot of fun. Are you familiar with the event, like how it's structured?
Yeah. The 10 events, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 10. So the cool thing, and it's interesting. I want to talk to you about this a little bit because it's kind of what you've been, you know, are suggesting for CrossFit to adopt for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like the benefit of saying, here are the events. It's going to be the same everywhere. You know what you're training for, you know what you're doing, you know what's coming. The rules are the same. So it's even cool because like your Hyrox race time, you can compare that to like all the races that are going around the world because it's the same race. And it's a running race and it's done indoors, which is also interesting because with a lot of like, okay, like marathon, like 10K times, like, okay, was it a hilly course? Was it a hot day? Was it a windy day? Like there's still a lot more variables, but this is all done indoors. So there's Hyrox Dallas in November. And I think I'm going to sign up. I think it'd be a really fun thing to do.
It's like a 1K run in between each station.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's a 10K race. That's how much running you're doing. You're doing 10 kilometers, which is 6.2 miles, but every kilometer it's split. There we go. Thank you, Liz. So every kilometer you have to do one of these. So it's And it's always in this order. So it's 1,000-meter ski erg, it's a 50-meter sled push, 50-meter sled pull, 80-meter burpee broad jumps, 1,000-meter rowing, 2,000-meter farmer's carry, 100-meter sandbag lunges, and that's the long sandbag on your back. And then, dude, this is so gnarly. At the finish line, so you finish the 10K. So you always run before you do the event, is my understanding. And then the last thing is 100 wall balls, and then you're done with the race.
So I wonder if you look at like, isn't that one guy, isn't Hunter, is he's the current champ? Is it Hunter?
I think so. Yeah. He's like really big in that scene.
Yeah. I wonder how much the run plays a role. I feel like
huge. It's a huge.
It has to, right? Because I mean, dude, a 10K is going to take, how long does a 10K take? Like 30 minutes?
So each 1K is like right around like 0.6 miles. So it's like over an 800-meter run every single time. So you're looking at like, if you're cooking like under 3 minutes, most people like anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes. Like,
so like that's like
if that was an 800
running.
Yeah. So it's a lot of running. So it definitely like biases like endurance and running. But the thing is, you can't quote unquote be a runner because you're not going to be able to get that sled moving. You're not going to be able to like, really like pull the sled. Like it's an interesting mix of like, I think that there's enough quote unquote strength components, even though nothing is a lift, that you can't just be like a skinny aerobic runner and do really well in this. Like you have to be able to move some weight.
Yeah. Row and skier require a little bit of like, like.
Exactly. But even those, you could argue that if you were just like an aerobic machine, you could do well in. I think that the sled, the farmer's carry, like all that stuff makes it very interesting because
and the wall ball at the end
and the wall ball at the end for sure. Cause now you're also like requiring, some accuracy and like, if you take the average like endurance runner and you ask him to do an air squat, dude, it's gnarly. You'll see some gnarly squats. So Hunter McIntyre is the
195.
6'2", 195.
So I'm doing the tactical games in September. Yeah. And are you doing this in November?
Yeah, I was looking at it this morning and I was talking to Ariel about it because I know she wants to sign up for something so she can like, get back into training, have something to look forward to. And November is far enough that like she feels comfortable doing it. So we both want to do it individually, but together because there's pair.
I might be able to get convinced of that depending on how things go at tactical games. I need to see but yeah, I might be able to convince. I mean, dude, that looks fun. And it's all about setting these like seasons and these pillars and these like, like I want to have things to train for. And right now it's like, dude, I want to get everybody who listens to this podcast rallied around, finding goals and training for them. I think that's really important. So I got tactical games. I've been committed to that. I couldn't do it before because Ava was in that residency program, but now September.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about it, man. I'm excited. Yeah, I'm going to sign up for this. It looked like registration wasn't open yet when I looked at it this morning, but it's here, it's in Dallas. It's also like accessible. Like I looked into the tactical games. I would love to do that stuff, but honestly, like I'm just not in a place to like commit to the gear just yet. Gosh. It's a big gear commitment for sure.
It's a huge gear commitment. And
I can tell you right now, like tactical games, like 100% in my future, like it sounds like such a cool, and I can't wait to watch you do it and train from it. And then luckily now with like a lot of the people that we know through the podcast, like have a really good support system to like ask questions and all that stuff. So definitely there. But since I've been running a little bit, I literally, the reason that I stumbled on this was I was looking for running races. I was like, it'd be nice to do something at the end of the year, whether it's a half marathon or a 10K or a 10 mile, it'd be cool to have something to train towards. And then when I saw the New York City one that was literally this last weekend and all these people that I know doing it and all posting how like professionally run and fun of an experience it was, I was like, all right, if there's one in Texas, done, I'm doing it. So that's the latest. I'm going to sign up for this Hyrox race it's in November. I think it's like right before Thanksgiving.
All right. I'll talk to Ashley about it. Maybe I'll do that too. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it'd be fun, man.
Dude. Yeah. Look, the idea of this show is to share what's going on in our lives, give people inspiration. Obviously we shared a little bit of fitness knowledge today. There's a lot more we could talk about with the CBP. my voice is a little hoarse because I've been just doing a lot of these type of things. But I wouldn't change it for anything. I was on a flight home last night, pretty late. Actually, I got home late, and I try and stay as few nights away from the family as possible. So I end up booking really shitty flights, like leaving at 6 a.m. and getting home at like midnight. Like it just the way it structures for me, because it's important for me to be home. But I was just thinking about it, dude. Like I wouldn't really change it, man. This is the life I chose, and this is the one that I love, and it allows me to go meet cool people, do incredible things. And I just hope that everybody listening to this, like, find something that they feel driven and purpose driven for. And if that's not in your work, you can find other things outside of that, whether it's your faith or your community or your gym. But you want to find things that fire you up, and because then it doesn't really feel like work, right? It just feels like a part of what you're doing to improve your own life, improve other people's lives, and provide for your family. So I'm very, very grateful for everybody who listens to this podcast, who gives us a microphone, gives us an opportunity to make an impact on other people, but also provide for our families. So I just want to say thank you.
For sure, man. And I share that sentiment like 100x. If tomorrow someone recently said this in a conversation, and so I was thinking about it too. Like if tomorrow I won the lottery and literally did not need to work, I would probably still want to do a podcast, and I really enjoy doing this podcast. I would probably still write. I would probably still, program workouts for myself, which is what I do for Flex. So the fact that like a lot of what I do for work is stuff that like, tomorrow, if I didn't have to do it for work, like I would still do it. I think is a huge testament to how lucky I am to be in kind of a similar position to you, man, that, this stuff is so fun. And always hearing from people that do the podcast, are following Flex and getting awesome results, read the newsletters and love the stuff that we're putting out. Like that stuff just is icing on the cake, man. It fires me up so much because I genuinely enjoy doing that stuff. And then to know that it's, positively impacting people in any way, is just the fucking best. So yeah, man.
Yeah. So make sure that if you're not on the newsletter, check out the podcast show notes. We have the newsletter link there. The newsletter goes out every Wednesday. It's awesome. And, we really appreciate you guys listening to the podcast and giving us the opportunity, like we said, to do what we love. And, if we could ever support you in any way, make sure to hit us up. We will be doing our next Q&A. So if you do have any questions for July's Q&A, make sure just to email those in. You can respond to the weekly newsletter. I respond to all of them, and you can ask any questions you want us to hit on the newsletter. But, on that note, Gabe, a lot of gratitude today. Really appreciate all you guys. Hit us up, and we look forward to seeing you guys again next week for another great episode. What you got, bro? What you got?
What I was going to say, here's what I was going to say first. First, I was going to say, if you end up doing this Hyrox in Dallas, there's no way you're beating me. That's the first thing I was going to say. But then, dude, there are same-sex pairs. Dude, we should team up for the fucking Hyrox race.
Well, no, you just talked shit and then you just combined it. So you said,
right, because because then I was like, we
could do it together.
Yeah, we could do it together and then talk shit to other people. Think about it. The podcast duo tackles the Hyrox rate.
So if we do it separate, I could talk shit when I beat you. But if we do it
but you won't beat me. So I think the better choice for you would be to accept my invite to tag up so that you don't have to be like, Gabe beat me in this Hyrox race. Anyway, think about it.
All right, you heard it here first. I appreciate all you guys, and see you again for next week.